All right. Gordon, can you see everything fine?
Yep.
Perfect. Clay Winder, Clay.
What's up, everybody?
There you go. Good. All right. Everybody usually files in a couple minutes late, but we'll get rocking anyways, Clay.
Let's talk about the most important things first. That'll teach them to be on time.
Projections, our secret projections. All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Johnny Christensen. I'm the regional director for Keller Williams, Utah. We have surged high and low for the best guest ever. That person didn't show up. So Clay Winder, just kidding.
Come
Here,
on.
I got my list of Clay jokes right here on this paper.
Oh, gosh.
Just kidding. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Clay Hamilton Winder. He's been my real estate partner on the Red Sign team since 2008. Clay, we are getting old. How do you feel about that?
I just wish we would have figured out how to be MREAs sooner so we wouldn't still be doing this, but it's too much fun. We can't leave it.
So true. Well, thanks for being on. We have quite the journey to go through 2024. Even 2023, the last 2 years has been quite the roller coaster as we've laid out the last several quarters. So we are recapping 2024. We've got the most latest data out there, but I know everybody always asks, so we want to shout out the gates that we will have the slides this afternoon published by visiting kwutah.com. So if you just click on resources link at the top right, and then click agent resources, quarterly market report. So we've got all the previous quarters. Our fancy slideshow is ready and available for all of you out there to include in any of your buyer seller communication, presentations, whatever. It's been fun to start seeing a lot of these slides show up all over. We also do record this in case you want to rewatch it or someone missed it or you want to share it. We throw it on our YouTube channel at direct link is just kwutah.tv. So the YouTube, kwutah.tv or kwutah.com, and just find those agent resources for the quarterly market report. So, Clay, how's the last year been for you?
It's been good. Hasn't been great, but it's been good. It's been I'm excited to see these stats because I think quarter four specifically surprised a lot of us in a positive way.
Yeah. So the Gardner Institute puts out an economic report to the governor every quarter. We've got the latest one, and here is the 2024 year in review with the motto "Still Flying." So let me just try and read this. Yet again, despite dire predictions of higher interest rates forcing a hard landing, the remarkably resilient U.S. economy still flew high in 2024. Labor market softened somewhat off all-time low unemployment. Yet overall economic momentum continued. Inflation moderated but stubbornly remained stuck above target. Even as short-term interest rates dropped in later 2024, long-term interest rates rose. Incomes and total household wealth grew, supporting continued spending. In Utah, population surpassed the 3.5 million. Job growth continued, but at 1.7% remained well below its long-term median of 3%. This continues a post-pandemic trend of Utah largely mirroring U.S. job growth rates, diverging from the historical norm of higher job growth. Healthcare services and private education, construction, and government jobs all growth led the way, with only one major industry, trade, transportation, and utilities, contracting during the year. Housing shortages continued, supporting higher home prices. Affordability challenges among new buyers continued. Utah's high housing costs likely impact slowing job growth rates and more broadly impair Utah's economic growth. Utah crude oil production hit an all-time high. Utah's nominal GDP surpassed 300 billion for the first time, and Utah's GDP growth rate led the nation through 3 quarters. I just was reviewing another economic report the central bank put on all their slides, and it still is just amazing how many categories Utah is at the very tippy top of just economic stability. So still happy to be here in Utah. So Clay, let's start jumping into categories. You're out there slinging a million deals a year, so always love your insights just on how you are interpreting or communicating some of these stats. Obviously, not necessarily the number of agents, but out there with your buyers and sellers. So Clay will be kind of riddling us with some of his insights on that. But let's look at NAR.
Can I also just say, if you guys do have questions as Johnny's going through some of these slides, throw them in the chat box and I'll keep an eye on the chat box as well.
Yeah, let's make the chat active. So if you've got your own predictions, projections for the year, personal stories, you're welcome to share those and Clay will read them out. But yeah, let's talk membership. So NAR versus UAR, you can see has been on a slight downward trend the last couple years. 2024, NAR ended at 1.5 million realtors out there in the country. And even UAR contracted a little bit the last couple years, finishing at 18,924. I also still see, you know, a decent gravitation of deals to that top percentile as well. So I wonder always what percent of those were 0 deals or 1 deal. But sides per agent definitely have affected us. But here's just the decline the last 2 years. UAR down 1.63% year over year. Year before that was down 2%. Still pretty high number. But here's the sides per agent. So you can see that mainly that orange line is probably the most important for us, but you can see UAR sides per agent. 23 was 4 sides per agent. We went up a little bit as membership contracted, but we went up to 4.4. Clay, we got into business right around what, 2007, right at 5. So again, 4.3 all-time highs, 7.7, 7.5s there. So.
Well,
Again,
if you use that as a projection, hopefully what that means is more sides per agents in 2025.
That'd be my guess, right? So people always want to know what my thoughts are, Clay, as well as yours, just on kind of what we think the forecast is for the next 12 months. We'll hit a few of these categories, but again, that lack of inventory or that shortage of housing supply, I think, is still driving prices up in 2025. So here is all the major sources that we could find and what their 25 projection is on home price appreciation. So this is 2025. You can see the AEI Housing Center up at 5.5. You only got 2 that are in the red there. You got Morgan Stanley and Moody's, but pretty much the majority of them, the average is 2.7% appreciation. Utah tends to, you know, other than the last year or so, we've out appreciated the last decade on average. But my number, Clay, is 3.5%. 3.5% is what I think the nation housing will appreciate. And here's another new stat that Gordon polled, which I like to see, but people are staying longer in their homes. So this is median seller tenure just in their homes. We are back up to 10 years and on a trend upward. I think as you see kind of people being trapped maybe is maybe, or maybe not the right word, but they've got low interest rate. If they were to sell, move into something else, even, you know, at the same purchase price with a higher rate, you know, clearly they have a lot more affordable situation. So I think you're going to even see this kind of grow. The average tenure the last, you know, 14, 15 years was 9.1 on that. So, and here is the last 5 years. Last 5 years, collectively per state, national average is 57% appreciation over a 5-year period. That dark blue, clearly those are the states that led the nation. We were at 63.7%. And I think if we wouldn't have gone backwards a little bit in 2023, you know, just because we out appreciated everybody, but I think we contracted a little bit and then kind of stayed in that upper percentile, but on average. But you can see Idaho 74%, Montana 76%, Florida 74%, 78%. I don't know if you've ever heard, Clay, of AI. It's this new technology that's out there, but I was playing with that on just stats and projections. The best answer I got out of AI was that home values on average are going to go up the next 5 years. By 2030 is going to go up 46%. So I think due to that lack of inventory out there, that shortage, we're going to see some gains. So any thoughts on that, Clay?
Nope.
All right. So this is just the total snapshot of the Utah real estate market. New listings, you can see year to date up 10.5%. So from 23 to 24, the last 12 months, we have more listings, 10% more listings that came on the market. Pending sales, 7.5%. We have closed sales up 6.9%. Days on market up 5.7%. Median sales price is up 3.3%. Percent of original list price that sellers received from what they listed versus what it sold for, up 0.6%. housing affordability, which we made a little progress on that, and then it felt like rates were going up that last, 3, 4, 5 months of the year, which affected our affordability, but down 6.3% is what we ended the year at. Inventory, the number of inventory of homes for sale up 9.6%, and the month supply up 6.2%. Any of those numbers you felt the most significantly in your business, Clay?
Absolutely, housing affordability.
Okay. So let's hit all the major categories. We were pacing to end the year at 3.9 million homes sold in the country. It went up a little bit higher than we were that we thought it was, and we ended up at 4 million homes sold in the country. Again, quite the drop from even just 6.1 3-4 years ago. The peak in the country was 2005 at 7.1, but if you trace that line back all the way to 95, the last time we were this low was 1995, so 30 years ago. But if you haven't been on this the last couple quarters, if you pay attention to this green line that I had Gordon add, this is percent of households per sale. So the difference between us now at 4 million homes sold versus 1995, we've got about 120 million more people in the country than we did at that time frame. So I wanted to see the number of sales or closings per household. So you can see 3.1% the last 2 years. That actually outpaces all the historical data that we have. So less homes have sold per household, probably for a very, very long time, with just how fast those interest rates went up and kind of just hurt affordability quite a bit. Here's just monthly existing home sales. Again, we were hovering around that 3.9, trickled up November and December, like Clay alluded to, but still far off of those 2021 numbers. And then here is U.S. annual new homes. So this is new construction homes sold. Kind of stayed somewhat flat from 2023, but up 2.4%. You can see that 36-year average is 696,000 homes, new homes sold. Still under that line, we actually should be above that line to be eating into that lack of supply that we need. Here is annual home sale by year in Utah. So we went up 3.32%. 41,654 homes were sold in the state of Utah, up from that 2023 number. And then 45,000 the year before. Our peak was 2020 and at 60,000. So Clay, going back to U.S. homes sold, if we were 4 million homes sold in the country last year, what would be your best guess that we're going to do this year? More or less?
More. Yeah, I think it'll be a little more.
Throw it in the chat. If you think there'll be more homes sold in 25, just put more in there. If you think it's less, go ahead and say less. Let's see what the participants think. But my guess, Clay, is 4.4. I think we're actually going to see a decent pop. I think a 10% increase. I think a lot of people have just been waiting, on the fence. I think some are just not going to be able to wait for rates to go as low as they hope they'll go. Even the Fed yesterday, they didn't, or 2 days ago, they didn't decide to cut rates.
Well, and I think I think it's important to note we have more inventory. So we know potentially the inventory is there to be more than 4.1. We've seen the inventory trend go up. But we also know interest rates aren't going to cause us to sell more. It's going to be something else. So the question is, what is it? What if interest rates aren't going to drive them more? What is it? And that's where it's like, is it just like culturally, we're just going to stomach the higher payments? Will there be government incentive programs as early as this year that maybe nudge that, which hopefully the answer is yes. I think at every level there's discussion of that. But the inventory is there, but it won't be because of rates. At least that's kind of my opinion. So what will cause this uptick? And I think that's where the magic is. And as realtors, we need to be absolutely engaged with.
Yeah, I think all of those. I think you're right. And I also think even, a lot of investors that we know, rent's kind of flatlined. The cost of that rental property has gone up, so even if they have a great rate on it, they might have even gone to break even or even negative cash flow now. And some of those landlords might just throw in the towel and say, all right, I'm just going to sell this thing and cash out, right? So I think there's going to be numerous variables that cause just a little bit more sales, potentially up to that 4.4, which I think Utah will also follow that trend line, maybe 8-10% increase in closed units. So, and with even prices going up, that typically means closed volume. That's a good thing for the realtors that are in the business. So here's home prices. We already gave our projection around that 3 to 4% appreciation for 25, but here is what home prices have been doing in the country. We saw a 9.5% still above that trend line. So if that 4% yellow trend line is the long-term average, that is very sustainable. So if you're around that 4%, every year we could do that. But when it shoots up 5, 10, 12%, that tends to be an unsustainable number. But we finished officially in the country above the 400,000 median home price, which is there. But here is U.S. home prices by month with the overlay of the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage that month. Okay. So we saw a little bit of retraction of pricing in the country, summertime, and then kind of flatlined the last little part of it. But the growth was all in that first 4 or 5 months of the year. So here's the U.S. median home payment. So you take a median home priced home, purchase it with 20% down at the median mortgage interest rate, 20% down. So this is principal and interest payment. Right there, 24, the median home payment in the country, $2,100. So still a little flatlined-ish from last year, up a little bit, but also you see the interest rate overlay right there. So I think part of that, even if the market or housing prices, home sales, kind of just keep that type of growth and let incomes catch up, that will really dig into the affordability issues that we have.
Well, throw on top of this, and maybe you've got a slide for it, but record high in homeowners insurance. Also on top of this, taxes are pretty high. I don't know if we'd call them record high. Obviously, there's a lot of talk. Maybe it's rhetoric on helping in the tax, but taxes, insurance, I bet most people here will all admit to HOAs are almost all increased. So that's all coupled on top of this too, which is the painful conversation on affordability.
Yeah. Yeah, even all of our rental properties, Clay, what was it, 22? Every single one of our rental properties, we got escrow disbursement because there was an overage in our escrow. Every single rental property this year had a deficit that we had to cut checks to on all those rental properties. So it was insurance for sure. Property taxes went up all across the state. The other one's HOA fees, like you mentioned. Pretty much every HOA fee has been bumped up.
Yeah, it's funny. I've said my whole career as a landlord, as a real estate investor, your cash flow always increases as time goes on. But the last year for sure, it kind of started the year before that, cash flow's gone down because my rents have not exceeded the cost of taxes, insurance, and these darn pesky. I'm HOA heavy on our portfolio, and we've gone backwards on cash flow.
You're saying you always told people that, so you're admitting that you lie to clients?
I didn't lie. I was just a little too over optimistic, which I think we all were because we've had that trend my whole career.
Just kidding. All right, here's Utah home prices. We finished above that 500,000 price, which we did in 2022, but look how fast we shot up in 2018, 19, 2020, 2021. We significantly outpaced the United States appreciation just due to our shortage of inventory, more people moving in, our population growth just even compacted. If you remember the 2020, 2021 craze, just how fast prices were shooting up and multiple offers. But we actually were one of the handful of states that we retracted a little bit. We went down that 5% from 22 to 23, but we did see some nominal reasonable growth here this last year. And then here's home prices by month, kind of just hovering around that same level, but you also see that overlay of interest rates. And then here's the median home payment using the Utah median home price with the average, interest rate, 20% down, principal and interest. Again, we tend to be less affordable housing-wise the last couple of years here in Utah. So $2,589 was the median home payment with that same calculation. And then here, the Utah versus United States overlay. So just look how long we trended with the United States, and then pretty much right before COVID, that year before COVID, we just started separating ourselves pretty significantly from the United States due to a lot of our economic conditions here in Utah. And I always like to just put it in perspective, just with a lot of the major economic events that have happened over the last 70 years, kind of what appreciation, did or did not do those years. Like you look at the 73 oil crisis, pretty much just went back to 0%, but it didn't go negative. You even look at the Volcker recessions, the savings and loan crisis, and then the Great Recession. Housing bubble, but even look at the pandemic, housing boom, and high inflation. That's the highest appreciation swing that we had historically in 70 years. So the fact that we didn't drop, below that line is, again, is just more evidence of the lack of inventory or the housing shortage that we ended up with after the Great Recession. Here's home appreciation just by year. So we went up 4.5% in the United States, pretty much flatlined in 23. Utah home appreciation, there's that 23. We went backwards 5% and then popped 3.3% in 24. I think 25 will be pretty similar in Utah, right around that 3.5% appreciation. And then here's U.S. inventory, slowly climbing. Clay and I grew up in real estate in the 2008 and 9 days where inventory was just record highs. You're showing so many homes to buyers. There's just unlimited options for your buyers. Then we compressed all the way down to just, that very short inventory phase. But, even 3.7 across the entire country is a pretty healthy number, right? We still consider that balanced market at 6 months. I would contest that, even that 4 to 5 months of inventory feels pretty balanced. U.S. pending home sale index above 100 is expanding. Here's month by month home sales index. And again, we will share all these slides on kwutah.com. Click on resources, agent resources, and then the market reports. But here is new single family housing units completed across the country, that 55-year trend line at 12, which would be 1.2 million. But we're below that, so we need to be eating into that housing shortage still. So here is 24 to 2030 projected housing demand. The most units in the state per county is going to be Utah County. We've seen significant growth in Utah County. Then you got Salt Lake County, and then even Washington in third place, 22,000 housing demand down there in Washington County. So here's a showing index. So a higher number means an average home receives more buyer visits in a given month. All index values are scales relative to the index of 100. So basically, homes are getting more showings compared to that 100 index if it's above the 100, but we are right there at that 100 index line. We were above that all spring, and then towards pretty much December, Christmas, holidays time, right back down to that 100 index number. And then you see the year-over-year change. But our number of showings on each listing, on average, year-over-year change went down. So our listings were receiving less showings across the country. Clay, did you feel that?
Yeah.
Good comment. Here is our Utah annual months of inventory. 3.4 months. The country is 3.7. We ended up at 3.4, just a little under the country's months of inventory. Here is the month by month. Got all the way up to 4 months of inventory in August and September. And then here's new listings. So like I said at the beginning, we went up 10%. 10% more listings came on the market in 24 than 23, which is what's increased our days on market a little bit. Our months supply of inventory went up a little bit, but 57,941 listings came on the market in Utah last year. But our average is at that 63,000. So I think we'll continually see maybe a little bit more of the listings coming on the market this next year. Percent of new residential listings sold. So this is Utah Real Estate WFR MLS only. So blue is the new listings that came on the market. The orange is the sold listings, and then the purple line is basically the percent of those that sold. So last year we ended at 64% of listings sold.
Rip through your expired lists.
Inventory of homes for sale. Okay. So this is pending sales. So this is basically when you put it under contract. We ended up with 41,777, up 7.44%. And then we went down in 23. Month by month, pending sales. And then here is our US average days on market, 29 days on market. The US, this doesn't include under contract time period, whereas Utah Stat will, but 29 average days on market. Clay, do you think AI is going to make that a shorter time frame, or do you think it's going to stay the same with AI tools making us more efficient?
Days on market, I'm not sure. I don't think it, I mean, it should streamline efficiency, but I don't, you got to remember sellers still have to pack up and move. There's still a lot involved.
Unless robots can move for us.
Well, that's true.
Utah average days on market, you can see this does include under contract time period, but 65 days on market here in Utah. It's been trickling up. Red is 24. So you can see we went 54, 57, 62, 65 days on market. And then let's talk about mortgage interest rates, which is a major talking point the last 3-4 years, as they were low and then they shot up and they've been trying to settle down. But here is all of the projections of a bunch of smart organizations just on what their projection, the average mortgage rate for all of 25 will be. So you can see like Redfin 6.8, Realtor.com 6.2, Bright MLS, Moody's, Fannie Mae. My projection, so the average is 6.36. I'm in the Bright MLS category. I think 6.25 will be the average mortgage interest rate throughout the average of the year. So again, where are we at right now, Clay?
We're almost 7 today.
6.96. I know we got some mortgage folks on the call. So if you wanted to even shout out what your projection is or what your opinion is. So if we're at 7 today, and a lot of those organizations are projecting, 6.3, 6.4, 6.25, that means we're going to probably end the year at even lower than these for it to average out at the 6.25. Or we're just going to see some rapid decline quickly here the first couple months of this year. But 6.25, not too bad, but even you slip in the fives, there's going to be a lot of happy people, I think, around the country. Here's the bar graph. The peak we got 7.62 there. All the first half of the year, we just were on that downward trajectory, which was great. We saw a few Fed rate cuts that helped that, but that last part of the year, we kind of shot back up. Here is 30-year overlaid with the 15-year. The green is the 15-year. So 15-year right now is about 6.16. 30-year 6.96 interest rate. But let's look at the mortgage universe. 76% of mortgages have rates of 5% or less. So you can see 22% of mortgages have 3% rate or less. 35% are 3 to 4%, and then 19% 4 to 5%. So still a significant chunk of our mortgages have a fantastic rate.
Johnny, this is a huge moment, and I think we all know this, but I think we need to underscore. You made the comment earlier in the presentation about people are staying in their homes upwards of 10 years now because they feel stuck, and you were hesitant to use that word. I've gone as far as using the word held hostage by their interest rate, and it is true. But I think there's something to understand as realtors when we walk into these situations. And people say, man, I do feel stuck in my home because my interest rate is just so low. I'll even walk into situations and people say, I want to sell my house. And I say, you're going to walk away from a 3% interest rate? You're crazy. And they're like, well, call me crazy, but I want to move on in life. I need more space, less space. I have life events that have happened that are motivating me to make a move. And I do feel stuck with this interest rate. This is where understanding the alternative options of being able to sit down with a seller or a buyer for that matter and say, well, hey, like we love our lenders, but we don't love the rates that they can offer. So can we talk about seller financing? Do we fully understand the ability for a seller to sell their home on a seller financing contract while maintaining a 3% underlying mortgage and have the ability to, in addition to selling their property, keep an annuity where now they're making an arbitrage between their 3% rate and the potentially 5 point something percent rate that they can offer to a buyer. And this slide really does illustrate that we have 76% of our sellers are in this situation where though they might feel stuck, they also have a huge opportunity to make money on the bank's money. And that's why we really should, as realtors, fully understand seller financing so we can present that option to our clients.
Yeah, yeah. Good point. And I just think we just had to, like, the rates went up so quickly, it was like sticker shock, you know, and I just think it's taken a full year, 2 years for at least a chunk of the real estate market to get acclimated to those rates. So even people are, you know, have been around these higher rates, and they're a lot more willing to move now that they've just held on too long. So
Yeah.
point. Mortgage-backed securities. So the two levers that the Federal Reserve has, that me and Gordon always say, is the Fed funds rate, which they started lowering that, you know, earlier last year. They had a handful of cuts throughout the year. We're still floating around that, what is it, 4.25 to 4.5 Fed funds rate. But the other lever is mortgage-backed securities that they buy or sell. And they've been selling those pretty much since the end of 21, early 2022, which is about $500 billion dollars of mortgage-backed securities that they've got off their books, which is also what happens when the credit availability decreases. So the more they hold, the more money of the banks it frees up to do more loans and mortgages. As they sell them, you see a credit crunch, that there's less, you know, credit or just cash or whatever available from banks to go out and loan on mortgages, which is also compounding the lack of mortgages being written by our mortgage professionals. So here's even total Federal Reserve assets held beyond just the mortgage-backed securities, but a pretty steep decrease. We peaked somewhere around even 8.7, and in what 2 full years, they dropped about almost $2 trillion of Federal Reserve assets. It's crazy. Chump change to Clay, but for the rest of us, that's a lot of money. Here is the annual Mortgage Bankers Association. This is their purchase index that includes all mortgage applications for the purchase of a single family home. It covers the entire market. So this is conventional loans and government loans. 143.2. So the index 100. But if you just look in comparison, when you kind of fill out the mortgage market the last several decades, still low, right? I would have guessed that this might have trickled up a little bit, but nationwide, last year, 2023, 156 went down to 143. Here's kind of the bar graph, just been hovering down there, up and down a little bit. And here's what I was talking about, the mortgage credit availability. So a decrease of almost 2% from 23 to 24. Which is, you know, borrowers getting declined here and there. Did you have any borrowers rejected this last year, Clay?
Unfortunately, too many.
Well, we did see an increase for our mortgage professionals out there, is an increase in the mortgage refinance index. So this covers all mortgage applications to refinance an existing mortgage. It covers conventional and government refinances. So we saw a 36% increase. We're still low on this chart, but a 36% increase in mortgage applications. I think even as we saw rates decrease a little bit the first part of this year, I think that was maybe a little bit of spur of that mortgage refinance index going up. Went through that already. So here's foreclosure. This has been a buzzword the last couple of years. As soon as the market gets a little bit different, you start hearing the word foreclosure. Again, Clay and I grew up clear back here, 2008, 2009, in the real estate market. That there was a lot of foreclosures. We got pretty good at dealing with short sales on the buy or sell side. We represented quite a bit of bank owned or help people buy bank owned. We've seen a little bit of movement the last couple of years, but still very low. So a total of 322,000 U.S. properties had foreclosure filings during 2024, which is down 10% from 23, down 1% from 22, and down 35% from 2019 before the pandemic shook the market. Foreclosure filings in 2024 were also down 89% from a peak of nearly 2.9 million in 2010. 2.9 million in 2010, that was a lot. 24's data points to foreclosure trends potentially returning to more predictable levels, offering some clarity for industry professionals, investors, and homeowners. And then here's affordability. So made a little tiny bit of progress across the country, but 98.6, that index is set at 100. We definitely would love to be above that. If we see some construction costs maybe coming down, mortgage rates coming down a little bit this year, prices only just with, nominal growth, I think we're going to make some improvement in affordability in 25. Here is month by month. And then here's Utah's. So Utah actually went backwards, whereas the United States went up a little bit, but we're down 6.3% as we still had appreciation. Mortgage rates here in Utah, but hovering around that 74, all of 24 on average on that home affordability index on a monthly basis. All right, investment specialist Clay, let's talk about some investment property data. So rental rates, think they went up, went down, flatlined? Clay?
I wish they went up. I think they went up slightly, but not much.
Okay, next question. Is it cheaper to own or rent a home?
Ooh. Again, me lying to my clients for half my career. How many of us that have been in the business a long time always said it's cheaper to own than to rent? That has not been the case the last couple of years. And that's a painful thing. Now, granted, I can always talk holistically, you're creating equity, you're creating, a sense of home ownership. There's a lot of values, but in straight just dollar for dollar, it's been tough to compare.
Yeah. So who owns all the single family rentals out there? There's a news report every once in a while that just institutional investors are taking over the rental property world. That still is very small. So institutional investors are groups, funds, whatever, that they own over 1,000 single family rentals. Regional investors 10 to 99, and then smaller national investors are the 100 to 999. But the mom and pop investors that own 1 to 9 single family rentals owned still own the vast majority of our investment real estate out there. 80% mom and pop investors, 14% are that 10 to 99 category, but still a fraction. It's gone up, but still a fraction of our single family rentals out there.
And this is so huge in Utah. I've had multiple arguments with folks that say we've got to stop corporate America from buying up all our homes. It's all them to blame. Even an article here in Utah cited that over the last 5 years, 10,000 homes have been bought by corporations. But if you uncover that, it's not like in Utah especially, it's not the big groups that you see in some of the, the BlackRocks, if you will. It's not those big groups here in Utah. It really is a bunch of Johnny and Clays and our little LLCs. Buying rental properties. And I think all of us have had a great business with several investor clients of ours that were picking up lots of little rental properties here in Utah.
Yeah. So here is Utah's market rent for 25 set by HUD. So any federal housing assistance programs, these are the amounts based on bedroom, based on county that the HUD, Department of HUD, is setting. So if you look at a 4-bedroom in, Salt Lake County, 2,670, this doesn't say that this is market rent. This is just saying what their cap is for federal assistance, which tends to be behind market rent. So here's a decent snapshot out there per county. You got Cache, Davis, Salt Lake, Summit. Does that say Thule? Thule? Just kidding. Salt Lake average rent. 2024. So look at that. This is where we get the most accurate rent. Average rent in 24 for a 4-bedroom, Salt Lake City, $3,093. A 3-bedrooms, $2,496. So you can see the HUD number is what, 350-ish on a 4-bedroom below market rent. Here is the 24 Utah housing profile. The shortage of rental homes affordable and available to extremely low-income households. You can see 62,625 renter households in the state of Utah with extremely low incomes, or 19%. There's 43,000, over 43,000 shortage of rental homes affordable and available for extremely low income renters. 31,000 is the average income limit for a 4-person extremely low income household. 51,000 is the needed annual household income to afford a 2-bedroom rental home at HUD's fair market rent. And you say 75% of extremely low income renter households with severe cost burden. So again, those low income renters are really getting hammered on the affordability issues. Here is the median asking rent, 2024, 1,621. So in the United States, median asking rent for all bedrooms, we went backwards 0.41%. And in 2023, we went backwards 1%. So countrywide, rent has actually gone down the last 2 years in a row. What have cost of rentals done, Clay? Up, for sure. So here is United States average rent growth for 1 and 2 bedrooms. Again, down the last year, flatline the year before. 1 and 2 bedroom, here's your bar graph. But let's talk about vacancy. Just due to the shortage of inventory out there, affordable or non-affordable, but vacancy rates have still stayed low. So when we start crunching our rental analysis, we were always putting that 8 to 10 vacancy number, 10% number when we'd crunch it. Took us years to finally start to lower that, but you can see Utah in 23 was 5.3% vacancy, United States 6.5. So we've just been record low vacancy rates here in Utah, which even 2024, when that data comes out, it's going to be pretty similar to 23. But here's by county as of Q3, the most latest data that we have. Utah County, 2%. That's crazy. 2% vacancy rate. Davis, Salt Lake County at 6.6, 6.7. Even Cache County, our record up there, 1.9% vacancy. Let's go buy a rental up there, Clay.
Well, I wonder if that's your apartments too. Even just observing as you're driving down I-15, Davis and Salt Lake County the last couple of years have really been heavy on the big mega multifamily projects, whereas Cache County, Summit, Utah, not so much. Summit County is fascinating. The Park City folks, I'm sure they're all nodding their head. There is so much under construction in Summit County right now, which is really interesting to me. Because it's more of the luxury market. And I don't think we're seeing that in some of the other counties. So that could change as well.
Yeah. Yep. It does feel like that, but I feel like it's almost gonna it's gonna feel like it's stopped here pretty soon. I told the last quarter when we were meeting with some apartment groups, one of the big apartments construction companies that build a lot of the apartments here in the state of Utah, last year they had penciled 19 apartment complexes projects that they were going to build. They were going to start them. Only 2 of them ended up starting, just due to interest rates going up, costs of construction going up, labor costs, all that. So they just indefinitely paused a lot of these apartment complexes. So a lot of the inventory we've been seeing come online, that was baked to come online 2-3 years ago in the planning phase. So I think the shortage, of rentals is hopefully we figure out a way to fix that. But I see that a little doomsday coming.
Well, maybe vacancy caused it. Maybe they had all their starts in those heavy counties, the Davis and Salt Lake County, and so they paused it there. And maybe they pivot, and you'll see all those big boys rolling into the Cache County, Utah County, etc.
Yeah. But let's talk about operating expenses per unit. So this is the latest data we have is Q3 2024. So this is the average cost outside of mortgages for a rental unit per year. So you can see Utah County, surprisingly, still pretty low, $510 a month, $6,000 a year. You see Summit County is our top one there, $793 a month, $9,500 a year. You got Salt Lake County, $8,700 a year. Weber, Washington. So let's talk about the U.S. economy. Quite the dramatic swing from one administration to the other. A lot of things are hitting the news, a lot of policies, a lot of things getting crazy. Sometimes I just have to turn off the news, but I do like to pay attention to the major categories of what our economy is doing. But GDP has been at very sustainable levels the last few years. Normally that 2 to 3% is kind of what the federal government would like. You know, COVID just stopped the economy. We shot back up, but you know, the economy in general has been pretty surprising how resilient we've been the last couple of years as we've recovered from that. 2.8% GDP growth. I know that's a little number, but that is billions and billions of dollars of growth, which is crazy. You know, the tech sector, a lot of sectors are helping fuel that. But here is real GDP, gross domestic product. This is the accumulation of all goods, services, everything with our economy. Quarter four was 2.3, 3.1, 3.0. And that is something they look at. And then the other one is unemployment, right? This is the number that I am either really surprised about or someone's monkeying with these stats. But 4% unemployment, still very, very low unemployment. 34-year average is 5.8% unemployment. But we were 4% across the United States last year. We're down 3.6 the 2 years before that. Here's on a monthly basis, trickled up a little bit from last year, but still pretty good unemployment numbers, which even Fed Reserve Chairman said, you know, we're going to have to see inflation trending downward again, or we're going to have to see an increase in unemployment before they'll return to rate cuts again. This usually represents a strong economy.
Yeah, employment matters. Can I just say, as a recession realtor baby, whatever you want to call us, 2007, 2008 starters, employment early on, I realized employment directly affects foreclosures, right? When people lose their jobs, they can't make their payments, foreclosures happen, this and that. And that's what's funny is, I shouldn't say funny, but interesting, because right when rates went up and like we, you know, kind of that 2020, spring 2022, and you guys all remember that moment, there was kind of this panic of like, oh no, like we're in a tumultuous time. I went out and I like dusted off my account on ResNet and Hubzu and HomePath and HomeSteps, Equator. Y'all remember Equator that manages short sales and foreclosures? Because I thought, oh no, I'm gonna see with inflation high and whatnot, we're gonna see unemployment spike, which means I better be ready for phone people to call me and say, shoot, we can't make our mortgage payment, we're in a pickle. But it never happened. And I know we want to like usually make the Fed and the government for that matter the bad guy, but it is shocking to me that they did achieve a soft landing. I think that's kind of what these numbers tell us. It never came.
Well, and the other number we look at is job openings. This still feels a little high, but again, right, this is saying that there last year 8.1 million jobs unfilled. So there's opening positions out there. Here is the U.S. Census, basically year over year, job openings versus job quits. So we have seen a trend in every sector of the United States. We'll be in that West sector, but we had basically a reduction of 10% job openings, so less job openings. And one of the things we saw with a great, unemployment, like a really low unemployment, a lot of money coming to the market, you know, post-COVID, we just saw a lot of people changing professions, a lot of people quitting and going to other opportunities or whatever. That's also decreased as those job quits all across the country. People are, you know, being a little bit more grateful just to stay in a good job. The real unemployment rate, so this is another number that actually includes underemployed. So they want more hours, but they're not getting them. And then it also includes marginally attached workers and discouraged workers. When Clay has a bad day, he is marginally attached to his job, so he might be included in this number. But the U6 number includes those other categories. So that would be that purple line up a little bit more, 7.5, saw a little bit of growth there. And here is that real unemployment on a monthly basis. And then here's the annual labor force participation rate. So this is all employed and unemployed workers divided against the civilian population. United States, 62.6% of our population is in the workforce. Utah, we've outpaced that. Tends to be because we've had a younger median age also in the state of Utah, but 68.7%. Participation by age group. So the blues, 24 to 54. And then 55 years and older. But here is a new stat that he threw on there. So you see that top line of baby boomers. You just see as those baby boomers have been in the retiring phase of their careers. But then that Gen Z, officially we expected this, Gen Z are expected to overtake baby boomers population wise in the workforce. And clearly every year after this, the Gen Z is just going to grow on that.
And this also affects the cost of money because all those boomers, they're taking their money out of the higher risk categories. So that's also leading the inflation as well.
Good point. Millennials still the highest percent, 49 million millennials out there. So here's another stat that kind of just shows a little bit of the effect of the baby boomers out there, but 11,200 Americans are turning 65 every single day. 24 will see the greatest surge of Americans turning 65. So you saw that peak right there at 4.17. 25, 26 will still be pretty high up there. 30.4 million Americans will turn age 65 between 24 and 2030. That's as much as the population of Texas. 30 million will be hitting 65, and then 4.1 million Americans will turn 65 each year through 27. You can see some of these other stats on baby boomers. The 65 to 74 age range has an average net worth of 1.7 million. This is the big one we've been talking about forever. In the US, nearly 84 trillion with a T, trillion dollars in wealth will be transferred from the baby boomer generation over the next 2 decades, particularly to millennials and Gen Xers. This shift of wealth will impact the US housing market, healthcare, education, labor markets, financial, a lot going on with that wealth shift. Real wages. So again, we want this to grow. This will help affect that affordability category. So this is real wages. So real wages also includes inflation against the actual income growth. So does it feel like my money is going a little bit farther? Last year was a 1% growth in that across the country. As you saw inflation just cruise up, even though people were getting job raises, the cost of everything just buried that, and it even felt like it went less far just with those decreases right there. United States real average hourly earnings month over month, December. Here's weekly payroll wages index of all employees. So we've seen some positive growth there in the wage index.
Hey, Johnny and Gordon, can I just bring a question that Becca just asked in the chat room back a couple slides? Are boomers retiring as expected? Like or are they working longer? I think we want to assume like, well, they're probably working longer because inflation, but has that impacted the stats?
Yeah, the figures that I've seen, more than half of the boomers started to retire. And then some of them have been forced back into the market due to inflation, to either part-time or in some way.
Half, that's a big number.
Yeah.
You remember in the Great Recession when they had that tax credit for first-time home buyers that we used a ton? Like that was a huge surge of us helping buyers get into their first home, that post-Great Recession recovery. We thought that was just a big bump up, that worked. But what we saw over the couple years after that our buyers, first-time home buyers, actually dropped. So over a long period of time, it still kind of stayed on course. What we did was just bought some of the first-time home buyers up a year or two.
Yeah.
I think COVID did that too. So I think we saw some baby boomers retiring early just because of the craziness of COVID and lockdown. So we actually outpaced the retirement numbers. And then I think right after COVID, it dropped and more ended up back in the workforce. So I think over time, we'll see it probably just follow that average trend line that some of these are saying. But I think the inflation, no doubt, the point that Gordon made was accurate too.
Yeah.
And the challenge is we don't have a replacement for the boomers. And you're seeing that a lot in construction.
Yeah. A lot of wise, hardworking people that aren't getting replaced, no doubt. Hopefully Tesla robots come sooner.
Yeah, Gen X, that we talked about that at MegaCamp last year. Gen X is kind of the forgotten generation, but man, they are holding up the economy. They're raising little snotty teenagers. They've got aging parents on their back that they're taking care of. They're running their businesses. But most of the four-way trades, your HVAC, plumber, electrician, and framers, they're Gen Xers and they don't have the replacements coming in to replace them when they come to retire. Very interesting.
Well, and if you follow Cody Sanchez, who was at Family Union last year or the year before, about buying small businesses, like those trades is a massive opportunity of, business purchases over the next couple of years.
Hmm.
So let's kind of just summarize. Inflation was such a big conversation the last couple of years, but as we've kind of gone down to a little bit more sustainable levels, it's hitting the news less, but we'll at least cover some of the basics again. CPI, the yellow line, which includes energy and food. So those can be so much more volatile, so you don't see those being as smooth of a line. Whereas the core, the light blue, that is your core CPI, which excludes energy and food. Either way, both of those, the CPI that includes energy and food, 2.9%. And then the core CPI is right there at 3.2%. But we were making tremendous progress up until September. And the reason I think we didn't see a Fed rate cut just this last meeting they had is you saw that trickle up, right? Energy, food might have impacted that, but we're at 2.9%. We want that number just to hover at 2% as long as we can kind of keep it. So I think if we start seeing some downward trajectory on that, hopefully we see some more rate cuts coming up. Here is with some projections out there, another way of looking at it. But 2024 projection, we kind of ended somewhat close to that. But 2025, they're projecting end of 25 to be at 2.1, 2.2%. And then 2026, we will fully be restored down to that 2%. A lot of things can move that. But here is items with falling prices. Maybe some of the only categories with falling prices, but smartphones, used cars, televisions, airlines, sporting goods, motor vehicle parts. Here's fastest rising prices, motor vehicle insurance. Did your insurance go up, Clay?
Yep, I'm part of that for sure.
Admission to sporting events up 15% just due to just the popularity of the Dallas Cowboys and just how incredibly of a team they are. They just continue to win. Just kidding. Might not be that stadium. Healthcare at home, photographic equipment, admissions, motor vehicle repair, dental services. Insurance, just insurance category in general has just been hammered, right? I know that's made the news a little bit lately, but here is consumer price index in selected categories. So, this is 12-month percent change. We saw a little bit of decrease in interest rates. The real median home payment, real rent growth, right, went down a little bit. Median home price, those have for sure contributed to inflation coming down the last 12 months. Fuel has dropped, but it still feels like everything else is still kind of pricey, right? Producers price index up 3.3% as of December. You saw really some concerning numbers of this up here, which we saw that driving inflation, but here's a little bit of a trend. As this goes up, that's a little bit of the future forecast of inflation fear that it might trickle up a little bit. Personal consumption expenditures. One thing we've done well the last several years is spend money, right, Clay? Our personal budgets have not really decreased. Q3 of 24, we still went up 3.7% of our personal consumption expenditures, which means we're still buying stuff. Amazon packages are still hitting people's porches. New cars in the parking lot. Restaurants are full. Shopping malls, even holiday shopping was up. So again, gotta be careful on that. Market-based personal consumption expenditures, excluding food and energy. See 2.5%.
And this is the one the Fed pays real close attention to when forecasting interest rates either going down or up.
Yeah. They want to keep us spending money, right? As soon as this goes down, they're going to change some economic conditions just to get us to swipe our credit cards a little bit more.
It has been interesting. We don't do boycotts as a country anymore. I feel like when we were a kid, it was like boycott tuna, save the dolphins. There is a real sense of like, you want to bring rates down or whatever, just stop spending money. If somehow we could just boycott consumption, we could get this all in check.
Did you say tuna comes from dolphins?
Save the dolphins. You don't remember that as a kid? Save the dolphins, don't eat tuna until they become dolphin safe. That was like the last boycott I remember. I was like 12 years old.
Average revolving consumer debt. This is not a good one that goes up, but up 6.9% in 24 from 23 is just the overall revolving debt. Revolving debt is not mortgages, it's not fixed debt. It is usually credit card based, line of credit based, but that's a high number, 1.3 trillion. Federal debt, here we know 34 trillion at the end of last year. It's a big credit card balance. I wonder if Visa carries that for the government.
And I don't have year-end numbers on those yet.
Q3.
Yep.
Any federal numbers are usually the longest that it finally takes to come out, but public debt as a percent of GDP. So you see we've kind of just hung around that 120% of our debt, as a percent of GDP. If you just research global economies, there's some sort of, very negative thing that happens around the 120% number, which is why we keep floating there. Japan's a good case study that went beyond that. What are they? Almost 200% of GDP, something like that. But a lot of the countries that have the hardest economic times sometimes is when that GDP percent number creeps up. And then here is annual personal savings rate of disposable income. In post-COVID, we're locked down, so everybody was kind of saving money, but that's a good number. But we went back into spending, less savings, but we did see an improvement last year, up 5% or at 5%.
There's that boycott I was talking about. We just need another pandemic.
Average deposits, 22 and 23, we saw less deposits on all commercial banks. 24, last year, we did see an increase on this. And again, deposits typically means more lending out of banks or institutions because their deposits are up. So that was a good sign of seeing that. Manufacturing durable good orders down slightly, down 1.4%. So this is new orders from manufacturers. Purchasing Managers Index. But here's kind of where Gordon summarizes this. This is the direction of all those, manufacturing, new orders, production, employment, all in this manufacturing index. If you see contracting or growing. So, even 2 years ago, it was all growing, which could be a sign of potential looming inflation. You got some mixed things in here. So also could mean we might hover around where we're at inflation-wise. Advanced retail sales percentage up 2.3%. Consumer sentiment. So this is basically a survey-based index of consumer sentiment. People are feeling better overall 24 than they did in 2023, up 11%. Okay, all right, let's hit Utah economy real quick. Again, just the amount of awards and just, where we're at as Utah. If I were to put my money on a state the next decade, Utah is for sure at the top of my list. We're 11th most favorable annual employment growth. We're still the youngest median age in the country, 32.3. Still largest household size. Clay, how many kids you got? 3. So
I was just gonna say, it's all about the birth rate, folks, and Utah dominates.
Mower, Utahns work 3rd highest labor force participation rate, 2nd lowest poverty, 20th lowest unemployment, 3rd highest median household income. You can see the industries where we've had that job growth: construction, education and health services, and then government. Government tends to grow always. Education, health services also growing, but construction, that's a positive sign of just construction going on. Here's change in non-farm employment. Utah and the United States in 1.4, 1.8. But let's talk about Utah unemployment, still below the nation. We are at 3.1% unemployment. United States sitting at that 4%. You can see that overlay. Always have a healthier unemployment number than the United States. Here's on a monthly basis, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. Health of Utah's industry, clearly construction, expanding, mining, information, financial. The one that's contracting is that trade, transportation, utility sector. Gross domestic product by state, year-over-year change. You can see 6.1%, so pretty healthy compared to some other states out there, but you see some 7s here, 7.8, 7.3. So what state is this? Nebraska. And you got...
No, sorry, it's Kansas. It's below
Kansas.
Nebraska. Sorry, boy, I could have got murdered by my geography buffs on that one.
8.6% Florida.
Yeah, look at Florida. I mean, Florida and Texas dominated a lot of stats, but Florida is an interesting state to observe right now.
And unfortunately, I only have stats up through Q4 of 23 on this one.
Yeah. Real GDP, our GDP in Utah keeps growing. Gross domestic product. Real GDP growth right here. Here is our personal income growth as late as Q3 24. You can see Utah still outpacing on personal income growth, just barely at 6%. The nation is at 5.2%. And then our last category, let's hit construction. U.S. new single-family home starts. We talked about this. 13 years below the 1 million homes average. So again, we want to be building over 1 million homes in this country to eat into the deficit or the shortage of homes that we need. But we've been fairly on pace the last several years. I think we're going to trend towards not filling that gap. But here's Utah housing starts by month. Purple is total building permit units. And then single family building permits trending lower the last 2 years.
This is so bad. These are the most doom and gloom slides of the whole day, in my opinion, right here.
And again, builders want to build, but the costs of construction, the costs of labor, the interest rates that they're borrowing money, the length, you know, some of our cities right now, impact fees, you know, a lot of the fees are going up. So it's been hard for our builders to build at a price that make them money and they can sell them on a market value price, right?
Well, and if you look back on this slide, the next slide, this also shows how many condos are being built compared to single families that are affordable.
Yeah. So the gap between the purple and the
Yep.
orange is pretty much the townhomes.
Yeah, we don't have smaller entry-level homes anymore that are being built. It's mostly condos.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Becca just put in the chat, RPAC helps with this. That's exactly what was on my mind, Becca. RPAC, being led by Chris Kyler, if you guys know him, he gave a speech to a group of us back in December where he talked about his efforts with Utah's task force that Governor Cox put together on housing, and there's no more clear message from Governor Cox's office that affordable housing is number one above all else that he's dealing with. But specifically with RPAC, it is housing starts. It's not, you know, because they can't control interest rates. We can't control a lot of things, but the one thing that the local government can really move the needle on is the cost of construction. And there were some very radical ideas that RPAC was promoting and talking about, such as forcing cities to lower impact fees, changing zoning. I mean, there's a bill that might be presented this legislative session that has RPAC support to a degree until it's refined, of loosening zoning, making all commercial zoned land also naturally by default zoned residential. So if somebody wants to kind of go backwards, so to speak, from commercial to residential, it's already done. There is no fees, no process for that. So it is fascinating and important for us as the realtor community to understand that construction and housing starts and building more inventory is at the crux of our future success. Like having a loud voice about that, supporting RPAC and really pushing through local legislation to make it easier for builders to build. Developers are not the bad guy, and we have to defend the developers. It's crazy the rhetoric out there that somehow builders and developers are this big boogeyman for so many people, when at the end of the day, it's like Governor Cox said it best. We want our kids to live near us, not with us. Like if we don't create more condos and affordable housing, we will have no choice but every single dwelling in Utah to have an accessory dwelling because we have to pack our kids in with us. So this is very important for all of us to be aware of and be up to date and to click on the news articles when it talks about construction here in Utah.
Yeah, I agree. And the next 5 years it's just, even the next 4 years is just, there's so much mixed information out there. Like the loom the looming, gossip of tariffs, like what that could do to construction. You think about even all the immigration stuff going on, what that could do to the labor force, even specifically in the construction industry. But you also look at the other side, that could actually help is, the AI. You think about robotics, you think about 3D printing. Do you know the largest home builder in the nation is actually the manufactured home company that Berkshire Hathaway owns? They make and ship more homes out there than D.R. Horton or any of the other big publicly traded builders out there. So even innovation on smaller square footage has continued to speed up. So here's U.S. price indexes of new single family homes under construction, up 1.8%. Pretty sustainable growth, but we just outpaced that pretty rapidly earlier in the decade. Here's new multifamily residential under construction index. And then here's builders confidence index. So this must be a survey based, where they get builders, true feelings about where the market's going. But we went pretty much flatlined 44.8, but the 22-year average 49.44. So I think when we see some movement in the affordability category, I think we'll see that shoot back up for the builders confidence. But we made some progress the last half of last year. Low was 39, up to 47 January. And then let's just look at debt. Here is total debt balance and its composition. $17.9 trillion of debt that us Americans hold. You can see the categories. The vast majority of that is mortgages. You see the home equity revolving is the orange. Gray is yellow. Credit card is yellow. Student loan is red. And then green is just all those other categories that don't fit in those ones. Mortgage originations by credit score. 760 is the green. But look at just how many high credit scores, when all that COVID money was coming in, just high credit score percentage just shot up. Auto loan originations by credit scores. Total debt balance by delinquency status. Red is severely derogatory. 120 days late is your orange. 30 days late, we've seen that trickle up the last several quarters. And the percent of balance 90 days delinquent. Clearly the red is student loans, that's more federal, laws passing and whatnot. But you can see that credit card one has shot up the last few quarters, which is always the first one to go typically, right? And then transition into serious delinquency, which is above the 90 days by loan type. Credit card again popping up. And the number of consumers with new foreclosure or bankruptcies. Bankruptcies have kind of hovered around that 120 number for several years. Just a little bit of growth in that foreclosure category, but still record lows. Third-party collections. Average collection amount, and then even proportion of consumers with collection has been pretty low the last several years. And that is it. Clay, give us your final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess, and you guys throw stuff in the chat box too if you have final questions. But the big question I always have is how do I translate this for, what does this mean to my clients when I'm out and about? And I feel like we kind of are in that. All of this data kind of summarized makes me feel like I'm threading a needle between how I speak to my buyers and how I speak to my sellers. If a buyer were to ask me, is it a good time to buy a home? How am I answering that question? Because some of this would indicate that home ownership's not as lucrative or attractive as it may have used to be. At the same time, is it better than renting? Obviously there's a lot of arguments. Yes. Same thing with when a seller asks, is now a good time to sell? What should I expect? And it's is it a slow market? Well, there's some stats here that says, hey, we're actually improving. Appreciation's going up. Our days on market isn't too radical. I think Utah, national was 29. I think the stat we saw from Utah real estate was 44. That's still relatively low compared to the recession days, but we kind of thread a needle. And I will say, like my overall interpretation is it absolutely is still a good time to buy a home. And I really do want to cheerlead my buyers to find ways. We might have to get creative. We might have to get into even some personal finances and really get into their motivation on buying and what is worth it to them, what is not worth it to it. And then for sellers, I think we kind of need to curb some enthusiasm. Because boy, it's such what the word I would use is sensitive market. If you're even slightly overpriced, if you are slightly poor condition relative to your price, we all know like you won't sell fast. You know, you won't even sell on the average. You'll end up in that expired listing if you're not carrying. I mean, that was a kind of a crazy stat too, that we're less than 70% of our active listings are selling. So it's like, okay, I don't want to be too optimistic for my sellers because I need to manage expectations, but I've got to thread this line of, but it still is relatively a really good idea and financially smart for our buyers to buy real estate and not rent for as long as they can. Boy, we walk a fine line with these stats. It's just not as black and white as it was just even 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, good insights. Yeah, I I think we all know that there's eventually an explosion coming just because of how low sales per household is. You know, how many people like are sitting on the fence for every buyer that you got across the line, Clay and Red Sign Team. Like there's what, dozens sitting there waiting for some conditions to slightly change or affordability or rates or whatever. We know that we've got to be building more homes to make up the long-term problem that we have of just a shortage supply, you know, supply and inventory balance. I know that's coming. I was hopeful that 25 we're gonna start to see that, and there still is a high possibility that could happen. But I at least the first half, if not the whole year, is gonna feel somewhat like 24 in my opinion, but better. I think we'll see a little bit of reduction in interest rates on average throughout the whole year. I think we will see an increase in homes sold, you know, like I said, from 4 to 4.4 million homes sold in the country. I think that we will still have some very sustainable appreciation. I don't think we're going to go backwards in values. I think it's going to be very nominal, like all those stats said, maybe 2, 3, 4%. And hopefully, you know, we're helping a lot of buyers and sellers, you know, go achieve the American dream, right? Gordon, any final comments? Okay, and again, the slides are here, right there, kwutah.com. Click on the resources link at the top right, Agent Resources Quarterly Market Report. You'll be able to download all these as of this afternoon, and then also kwutah.tv. So thank you for being on, and thank you for your chatter in the chat box. So thank you. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next quarter, everybody.
Thank you.